It seems to me that these changes are really stupid, that they have nothing to do with proper context, right? So let's say there is some kind of context you want to explain to the kids of today that the times were different back then. Well, then add a footnote. How about don't even add a footnote? If the book is out of print, it means it has not transcended the time. If the book is still in print, it means there's something in there that goes beyond the time it was written, right? I don't know why they're having trouble letting that one go. Then don't read Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I mean, the entire book is about naughty children. So I guess children aren't naughty anymore, right? They're incapable of being like that. The way they've been actually stealing children's innocence, there is no room anymore for being a child of any sort. I think that's what troubles me too.
Welcome to the New Flesh Podcast, the podcast you deserve. My name is Ricky Allpike, and joining me once again is Mr. Jonathan Astro. John, are you a big friendly giant?
A big friendly giant. Again, I've got to just... Is this a code? Is this an offensive code? BFG.
Well, I think Roald Dahl was talking about... He wasn't talking about, an actual giant. He was talking about something in your pants.
Okay, yeah, right. Well, I mean, I feel like, yeah, people are upset about some other stuff that he said, and I wouldn't put it past him from what I've read, all right? That's what I'm saying. But today we won't be covering any of that filth necessarily, but we will be covering the topic with our regular Emina Melonic. We always love to catch up with Emina, can't wait. New Flesh regular Emina Melonic is an adjunct fellow of the Center for American Greatness. She's an unabashed cinephile and holds a Ph.D. in Comparative Literature and 3 master's degrees in Humanities and Theology. Her work as a writer and critic has appeared in American Greatness, The Spectator, Law and Liberty, The New Criterion, The American Mind, National Review, and many more. Her last appearance on the show was in November 2022. That's episode 164 for those playing at home. We were discussing the Hillary Clinton reality TV show Gutsy, among other things, which we're not going to talk about today. Emina, welcome back to the New Flesh.
Thank you so much. And I'm so glad Hillary will not be discussed as well.
I didn't expect us to speak about her for so long.
No.
Clearly none of us like her. So it's,
Yes, that is funny. Well, we need to start by asking you about the children's author, Roald Dahl. I don't know if you've heard about this story. But so basically,
yes.
the Roald Dahl estate has come out with updated editions of his books. Books we all know and love: The Witches, Matilda, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. But they've hired sensitivity readers and changed sections that the publisher deems offensive. So just a few examples here: boys and girls have been changed to just children. The Cloud Men in James and the Giant Peach are now Cloud People. And in Fantastic Mr. Fox, his 3 sons have been changed to daughters. And I could go on. There have been hundreds of alterations. So what's your read on all of this? Are we doomed to have all old literature updated and altered like this, do you think?
Updated, I like that, right? That's what they call it. It's moving in with the times, right? I didn't know that it was 3 daughters, that they changed it to that. That's very interesting too. The one I saw was that Augustus Gloop is no longer fat, but enormous.
Yes.
I'm not really sure what the difference is there. He's still fat and he's still greedy. So, there's that. No, I mean, it really is. I've hated when people use Orwellian, a lot. But in this case, really is that, isn't it? And the fact that they're changing the language, the abuse of language, and trying to change some kind of, or I should say, real metaphysical reality, a real embodied reality in the text here, because they perceive in some way, right, that people are going to be offended by it. I'm wondering, are there really people who are offended by it if they read that? People who would pick up a book for their children, like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, are presumably wanting to read this classic book, right? So they're not going to be offended by certain words to begin with. So the only thing I'm thinking of is that they really want to, in some way, erase history. And one thing I always wondered about these, what do they call, sensitivity readers, right? I've heard about this sort of like notion, or people even have companies that offer these services. It was probably, I would say, 5 years ago. It was definitely a while ago when I think there was some issue with Mark Twain, which would be, of course, obviously, right? So in any case, I'm wondering often what goes on through their minds to whether they think that they actually are doing a service, right? Because sometimes people are convinced that they're being merciful of something, even though they're actually being destructive. So I don't know what you guys think. I mean, do you it's offensive. It's offensive to me that they're actually trying to change this, right? That's the first thing that's ridiculous. But are people really actually uncomfortable with something like that, of calling somebody fat?
It's funny. I mean, I actually did meet a parent who has a child kind of the same age as me. I think a 6-year-old, and she expressed some reservations about the Roald Dahl literature because there were some language about people being ugly and fat. So I actually have heard that from someone before, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'll concede that making some alterations to children's literature, you know, making those changes is a different bag to changing adult literature, you know. But I guess another way to go would be to teach children about historical context when reading these books. You know, I mean, you've got a son who's of an age to read Roald Dahl. Do you think he could understand historical context if you explained it to him? You know, I mean, you could say to him that in generations past, witches mostly worked as receptionists and supermarket cashiers, when now, you know, when they're not poisoning British children, but now they're top scientists and CEOs, but they still poison kids on the side. You know, you could go down that road. I mean, that's what's so ludicrous. Some of these changes,
it's all about profession, right?
Yes, some of these changes. Yes. I mean, I just mentioned the witches there. Like, to change the occupation of these witches, who, I mean, their main occupation is killing children, but then their side hustle is, you know, working at a supermarket or being a receptionist. But they've changed that now. They're business people and they're top scientists.
But I particularly liked that one, Ricky. They're not just scientists; they're top scientists. So they're the best. Like, they've got to make a point that they are the best of the best. You know,
right? So if you're the best, then you're evil. See, that's the thing. Maybe there's a little bit of that too, right?
But the changes they've made seem really strange. Some of them seem short term, you know, because changing a reference in Matilda to from Joseph Conrad and Rudyard Kipling to Jane Austen and Hemingway and Steinbeck, isn't it only a matter of time before all three of those are cancelled? I mean, aren't they all just cis white, you know, hegemonic evil powers themselves? So that'll change. And some of the other changes, as Ricky just pointed out, come across like they haven't read the books. That there's a dissonance there between the fact that, you know, if you've read the books and you go, wait a minute, aren't these people evil? Like, you know, do we want to be? Why is it important that they're go-getter women or something, that they're killers? Like, isn't the point that they're killers?
Right. So, like, the message of the fact that there's good and evil is completely lost. I shouldn't even say message, simply the context of the main substance of the book, you know, whatever it is, especially for children's literature. There's again, like, I cannot quite comprehend the mind of a person who is sensitive to something like this. I mean, you're mentioning that you actually have heard people say that, and I believe it. But I mean, I don't understand what would make you, first of all, think that. Okay, let me backtrack here a little bit. No, I don't think that bullying or calling somebody fat is a good thing. This is what their reaction always is, right? Because I'm saying you can use the word fat. That means that you can call somebody fat. You can't call somebody fat. There's nothing. There's no problem there. You can do whatever you want to do. But if you call somebody fat and they punch you in the face, don't be surprised that they did. You know, I mean, there are repercussions for all these things that we say, right? If you're a bully and you're calling somebody that, that's not a good thing, obviously. But but this goes beyond actually sensitivity, because it's completely censorship. That's really ultimately what it is. Now, if you want to have a context of some sort, it seems to me that these changes are really stupid, that they have nothing to do with proper context, right? So let's say there is some kind of context you want to explain to the kids of today that the times were different back then. Well, then add a footnote. Or how about that? How about don't even add a footnote. If the book is out of print, it means it has not transcended the time. If the book is still in print, it means there's something in there that goes beyond the time it was written, right? I don't know why they're having trouble letting that one go. Then don't read Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I mean, the entire book is about naughty children. So I guess children aren't naughty anymore, right? They're incapable of being like that. The way they've been actually stealing children's innocence, there is no room anymore for being a child of any sort. I think that's what troubles me too.
I think maybe from a more cynical point of view, could it be just a marketing ploy to get some of these woke parents on board? Because, a lot of the parents who grew up reading Roald Dahl, who love it, they're going to read it to their children regardless. So maybe it's a way of I don't know, bringing in some of these overly sensitive parents, maybe. Because
the book is not selling enough or something like that, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I remember there was that sort of controversy over Dr. Seuss. I forget which book it was, but it was a book that I think represented Chinese people in a strange way or something like that. And there was a huge sort of controversy over that. But it turns out that the book really has been out of print for the most part. And Dr. Seuss has written a lot of books. Some of them were stinkers, so the good ones remain. The Cat in the Hat and, Green Eggs and Ham, people still read that. Clearly the other one didn't quite make it, right? So, but I think they make these controversies perhaps bigger than they really are. And then, but in this case, I didn't do entire research, but have they made these changes, or are these changes proposed?
No, I think they've made them.
They've made them. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So then basically make sure you have, the latest or the editions of those books before these can't come out, right?
That's right. Yeah. You have to hunt out the old versions, won't you?
The old versions, right.
So one of the problems with this situation is that the people making these decisions are hidden from us, and that their rationale is never made public. So some of these changes, as we've talked about, they seem flippant or inappropriate. And, I think if they were made if Puffin, the publisher, was made to argue their point, I think they'd be a bit more cautious. Do you think that there's room for transparency in how these alterations are decided upon?
Doesn't seem like it, right? The fact that these people are making these decisions. I mean, how can we know what the estate of Roald Dahl is doing, right? That's impossible unless you're some insider or something. But I'm not sure whether transparency is the answer, since these are, I would assume, in some way private decisions made by the estate and by private publishers. So in that sense, I don't think that's possible, or maybe it shouldn't even happen, the transparency. But they're really kind of enacting a pseudo-intellectual assault. I've encountered assault on text in grad school, when so many times literature and philosophy, particularly literature, would be used as a way to express certain theory, or mostly ideology, whether it's Marxism or psychoanalysis or feminism, etc. And they would twist and turn the text, but the text itself wasn't changed, right? They would just assault it in a different way. This is a whole nother level of assault on culture. And I don't know, are people bored with this? Are they frustrated? Like, are parents really having trouble sharing reality with their children as how things are? I mean, are they not reading them Greek myths, for example? Are they just afraid of doing that, or Grimm's fairy tales? These things are pretty dark. I mean, life is pretty dark, So Greek myths are all about chaos and destruction and creation and, all of those things that make us human. And maybe that's really the problem here. I'm not saying that Dahl is the greatest, literature. If one likes it, that's totally fine. But I think that there is something of being human, in his work. And so my problem is that they're taking away that very basic notion of what it means to be a human being. And so to not have words like boys and girls, that's like the height of stupidity and insanity, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It seems that we're just getting further down the road of abstraction. And this has been happening for a long time. I mean, you experience, apparently, we read up on the Bowdlerized versions of Shakespeare, which are these sort of sanitized versions of Shakespeare they taught in the 20th century. Or you think about there's versions of the Arabian Nights or Grimm's fairy tales that were censored or changed or altered. But it's only when you go back to the original texts that you recover the meaning of those texts, really, and in all their inappropriate glory, like all of the Grimm's fairy tales. Some of the messages, I would argue, become meaningless when you add enough water to the liquid. And I think we're just witnessing it here. When you take away, I mean, it seems really simple to say, oh well, you can't call Augustus Gloop fat, but the thing is, I mean, on another level, have these people ever? Do they have kids? Kids know what fat is.
Right. Like are we talking about, we need a chart now of what's fat and what's not fat? I don't know. I mean, I think everybody knows when they have a little too many pounds on them.
Well, mind you, when I went to the Smithsonian, I did see a very alarming graph that said that it was something like 65% of Americans are obese. So maybe Augustus is, by the Smithsonian standards, maybe he's a normal guy. Leave him alone.
He's the new normal.
The new normal.
The worst phrase in the English language currently, the new normal, right? Yes. It's almost like these speaking of fatness, right? There's a lot of these models, you get a catalog from something and it's like you see models just modeling clothes and then suddenly there's a kind of a fat model, like I that's like really bizarre, that is really bizarre for me to see. Or there was a fashion show
Emina,
I saw video.
You've got to say enormous model.
Oh, enormous! I'm sorry.
That's almost worse.
Enormous, but I actually think enormous is worse than fat.
Yes.
Honestly, I don't know. Enormous is like when you describe someone, you say that person is enormous. I mean, there's a there's a level of complete exaggeration when you say that. But it's very strange. It's almost like the mediocrity has been gaining traction, has been growing more and more since identity politics have kind of hit the public scene in America. Really, I would say the identity politics really went into the public policy and a larger culture when Obama became president. He took everything that was, that happened in the academia and he brought it forth into the public square in many ways. And so the idea of mediocrity was already building up. And I think with his way of doing things, it became part of the consciousness here in the United States, at least. And so what I'm trying to say is that as mediocrity was rising, the excellence was going down. And so you're not really supposed to be best, right? You're not supposed to, competition is bad. And therefore, going to this fat, thin thing, then being thin is bad because that means that you are maintaining your weight in some way. It means you're eating well. But if you're fat, you shouldn't be shamed. And on top of it, actually, you are healthy. You can do yoga. Do you know how many magazines I see, with like a yoga magazine or whatever, one of those things. And there's a person doing yoga. She looks like she's 300 pounds. It looks ludicrous, by the way. First of all, it looks ludicrous. Second of all, you are not healthy. I don't know what kind of mirror you're looking into, but you're about to have a heart attack. so I guess I don't, the sacrifice of reality here, I think, is huge. That's really what it is.
But if you're thin, you are partaking in the erasure of fat people.
That's right. That's right. Of course.
It's interesting. You mentioned mediocrity. I think we do lack a lot of aspiration these days. And I did read somewhere that someone was making the comment that on TikTok and on Instagram and on social media, you can see people doing the most amazing things. Like you can see 5-year-olds that can play the guitar like you've never seen before. You can see kids in China who play the piano better than, concert pianists do. And that is a very demoralizing and hopeless sort of thing to engage in, to watch these sorts of images and videos, because you see that and you go, well, I'm 30 years old. I'm never going to be able to play the guitar like that. Or, I'm never going to be as fit as that person who's doing some amazing trick or some amazing physical feat. Like that can be very demoralizing in a way and crush your spirit in a way.
Right. No, we don't see like the stories of people succeeding, right? I don't know if that's pretty much, I think, Western societies, and I would think in Australia it's kind of similar in that regard, that if anybody is striving to be the best at a certain profession or talent, whatever they have, then that is perceived as something as negative. But here's the other side to that. The same people who are saying that, it doesn't matter if you are really good at something. In fact, it should be decreased, right? You should decrease yourself, your talent, in order to make everybody else feel better about themselves, right? The other side of that is they're not saying that it's important to be good. So let's say, to me personally, as I'm raising my son, for example, the most important thing for me as a mother is for him to become and be a good human being. So that's the first thing, right? And the second thing, then his talents and everything comes, obviously encouraging in whatever talents he has, right? So being a good human being, I find to be more important than being the best at something, right? However, these same people who are not who want the talent to decrease are not talking about being a good person, right? And I feel like what's missing here from all of these equations is thinking that there might be a higher being than yourself, right? This thought that whether it's the community, whether it's God, whether it's your faith, there's something higher than yourself that's missing from the picture, from the entire culture, I think.
But have you noticed, Emina, that you mentioned identity politics, if that is what we're talking about, that in people who follow that movement, or people who say those ideas, they never talk about character. They never talk about things like integrity, courage, generosity, kindness, or any kind of. We don't talk about morals. So we seem to talk about externalities. We seem to talk about, you could say victimhood, I suppose, but it's mainly, melanin or genitals or how sorry you should feel for me based on whatever those things are, So I feel like we need to somehow turn this ship around and get people talking about what it means to be a good person, and to use those texts from the ancient texts, and get all that wisdom and bring it back. I think that could be an antidote to some of this stuff.
Yes, absolutely. I have said this before, is that what's really being taken away from us right now is this very fundamental aspect, which is what it means to be a human being. That's the question they're trying to take away, right? And once you stop asking that question, that also means that you won't be able to be united with other people, right? And any sort of totalitarian power hates when people are united against it, right? So there's that aspect too. But I think that, like we were saying about courage, being character, like you were mentioning, all of these classic stories, really, children's stories, include that. And I'm wondering whether changing a lot of this stuff has to do with not just watering down the meaning, but completely negating any sort of humanness, right, that's present in these texts. And the other aspect, I think, of that is that they are not letting people make their own judgments about a particular work of art, whether it's a book or a movie or whatever. They're telling you what you should be thinking about this, whether you should feel guilty about it for reading it or watching it, what kind of pseudo justice should be on your mind when you are reading it or watching it. And that's actually one of my biggest problems with that particular, with this sort of identity politics faction, or whatever you want to call it, this movement. I mean, at this point, it's wokeism, I suppose. I hate that word so much.
Yeah.
And
it is like a swear word, isn't it? It's that bad.
It really is. And it's meaningless at the same time. It really is. I mean, it's, forget the fact that it's grammatically incorrect, but it's completely devoid of awakening. That's what's so ironic about it. That there is no, people who are claiming to be woke are under such cloud of ideology, they don't even understand that something else exists. They're in Plato's cave. And people who buy into it are in Plato's cave too. They do not see reality at all. Reality isn't pleasant. Doesn't mean you're going to agree with everything or that you have to accept it, obviously. But this need to cleanse things in a way, or whatever they perceive to be, is just further, I think, contributes to the erosion of humanness, or the erosion of human spirit, ultimately, I think.
Well, if we turn our attention back to the censorship of Roald Dahl, I think it's concerning when you think of the push towards digital books that we're kind of experiencing as well, like ebooks, because presumably those would be easier to alter and quicker to alter. We could enter a 1984 like situation where books are being rewritten constantly to conform to the whims of these woke elites. But it got me thinking about cinema, and most people stream movies now. So what's to stop film studios and corporations altering works of cinema? And John, I think you were telling me that Disney has already done this with Splash. Is that right?
Yes. Look, I mean, it's a fairly, obviously mainstream example, but the version of Splash the only version of Splash that's available on Disney Plus, when Daryl Hannah runs into the water, they've done this really bad CG job on her blonde hair to cover her butt, because butts are inherently disgusting and only mean they only mean sex or something. So we've had to cover that up. But that's just one example of, what I would suggest is a creepy change. Like, I just thought it was her being free. Like in that scene, there's something wonderful about a mermaid who is free and doesn't understand any of our social mores or what it means to be, human in the way we understand. And she just runs into the water, and isn't that wonderful? And it's Tom Hanks that's being the stick in the mud, or being that's where the joke comes from. But so when you remove it, it's there. A cousin of that joke is there, but you've softened it unnecessarily and proved yourself to be part of the temperance society.
Yeah. I had no clue that's what they were doing. That's crazy.
I pay attention to these things.
Yes. I know.
Nudity on screen.
That's right. Don't type it in. You might get some really weird stuff. So, right? Yeah, that is really crazy. You know what this feels like? It's almost like, years from now, somebody, who was a child who saw movies or read a book and say, what they've read or seen, and this older person's going to tell them, "Oh no, you got the wrong book there. Let me show you the real book." I can just see the scene. Like some wise person, is saying, "No, you need to see the real movie of what happened." So it really is kind of like a Soviet totalitarianism, when people would smuggle books to read. But in this case, it's perhaps even worse because it's altering the original.
Yeah. Well, on the other side of the coin, though, like the digital medium could facilitate two versions of the work. The altered, updated version and the original.
They don't want to admit that they've changed it. You know that.
I do. Yes, I know that.
That's why part of this is that they're offended that they have to explain themselves. That they want to just say, no, this is the definitive version, the only version.
Well, you sort of see a version of that with George Lucas and the Star Wars special editions. He redid these Star Wars movies and he added in all this extra stuff that didn't really add anything to the story, and he will not let the original versions be released anymore, because these are the definitive versions, and some of the stuff he's put in there sucks, and I'd rather watch the old ones that I grew up with.
Well, the troubling thing, Emina, is that the first film from 1977 is in the Library of Congress. So is that the only version of that movie? What are we left with?
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. What are you left with? Right. Some sort of bad heap of history that means nothing. Well, hopefully not.
Okay, Mina, let's change gears slightly here. We wanted to touch on some of your recent writing. I was very struck by an article you wrote for American Greatness titled "The Soviet Erotic and Today's Misbegotten Effort to Kill Eros." You write about a French photographer who in 1956 visited the Soviet Union with his camera, where he captured candid shots of ordinary people in everyday situations. Can you tell us about the photographer Henri Cartier-Bresson and his Soviet trip?
Yeah, that was an interesting research that yielded when I was looking into the photograph. Really, we started with the photograph of the workers in the car factory. I found that it's a car factory in, I believe it was in Moscow, maybe, I don't know, but it was a kind of an interesting triad in a way. You had two women and a man. One woman was clearly a supervisor, and the man was the worker. And there was definitely some chemistry there going on between the two of them in that environment. While the third character, not the character, but the woman, the second woman, is kind of looking on from afar, almost in envy that these two are having this kind of, in a way, erotic encounter. And Bresson, when he visited Soviet Union, I didn't see any evidence that he was actually a communist sympathizer in any way. He just kind of captured people the way they are, and so he had a way of making really ordinary things seem kind of extraordinary in almost all of his photographs. But it showed some kind of humanity in it, and so as I was thinking about it, I realized how Eros. I already have known this for a while, but I was struck by the fact that there was an incredible amount of Eros in this environment that is, well, clearly communist, right? And you associated with totalitarianism for a reason. And yet these people were somehow still able to be human. And it made me think of the fact that everything is being neutered today. And especially Eros that's being killed continuously. Once you get rid of once you're trying to say that there is no gender difference, or that men can be women and women can be men, then any sort of fundamental relationship between those two will be dead, right? So any sort of Eros will not be possible. But it was looking at the photograph, it was an interesting connection between Eros and totalitarianism, which is what, got my attention going from the photographs.
Well, you've been writing about Eros in a number of different contexts lately, and obviously in relation to the Soviet photos, some film as well. Now, in Greek mythology, Eros is the god of love, if I'm correct. Now,
Right.
the way you've been writing about it, how can you? What's your definition in the way you've been writing about Eros lately?
Well, I've always I sort of usually try to steer away from any discussion of Greek mythology, or at least that hasn't been in my lexicon when I'm talking about it. I've usually confined myself within the notion or within the relationship between a man and a woman, and whether Eros has, what kind of power it has, whether it is related in any way to ethics, whether it's related to justice, whether ethics and justice is suspended once Eros is being enacted between a man and a woman. In other words, you have this incredibly private moment between two people. It's almost like a way of losing oneself. If you think of Song of Songs, for example, or Song of Solomon, as it's also known, there is kind of a tension there, because you don't know what is community, right? With Eros and without Eros, right? Unless there is some sort of movement towards fecundity, right, towards children, is Eros then realized? So those are some of the questions that I look at, and definitely not. I have written some things about Plato's Symposium as well, but that's a little bit, it takes a different trajectory as opposed to, I don't know, talking about Kathleen Turner in Body Heat, So but maybe they're all related. I don't know. So that's sort of where I go with it.
Yeah, so maybe from a base level, I was saying that Eros is sexual desire. It's sexual tension.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There you go. Definitely, desire is obviously part of it. It is what makes the world go. I think that desire for life, not just in any way for sex or sexual tension or anything like that. But I do find it very troubling, actually, that sort of very fundamental, very basic human element is being squashed every day. And I think at this point, certainly, before it was feminism, I think, who was destroying that, because you're destroying the relationship between men and women. And but now, without a doubt, it's a transgender movement that's not only destroying the relationship between a man and a woman, but also relationship with the self, because we know what it is, right? If there's no gender difference, then there is no reality, right? And I mean, think of also of transgender people, let's say, who go through, I find this fascinating, people who go through this with the surgeries, they are really unable to use their new parts, ultimately, their new body parts that they have either, or the stuff, or the parts that they have cut off, or parts that they've added. They are actually unable to enact it in any way, which is just, it's kind of insane, isn't it? I don't know. It's mentally weird. I don't want to make any psychological diagnoses here, but anyway, hopefully I'm not going too far into it. But to me, this death of Eros at this point is definitely connected to transgender movement, and also general sort of lack of embodiment from the digital sphere. So I think it all sort of fits together.
I've got a great quote here from your article. It says, quote, "On one hand, we face moralists who insist that we ought to define relationships between men and women according to some rigid, dreary, and fictional manual from what they imagine held sway in the 1950s. On the other hand, we face a new wave of neo-Victorians who treat sex and erotic encounters in a strictly contractual way. There are relationships bathed in an antiseptic liquid. Here, men and women are not allowed to be themselves or to revel in what ought to be a source of joy and fecundity. Some women react to the so-called male gaze by proudly proclaiming their misandry, and some men choose a type of masculinity that very quickly leads to a corresponding misogyny or even pure homoeroticism. In all cases, the delicate balance between the masculine and feminine is destroyed."
Wow, that's pretty good.
You like that?
Hearing it like that, I never read it. That's not bad. No. Joking aside, no, that's exactly it, isn't it? I find that people are confused right now, with in regards to sex, and I think that certainly in regards to Eros or any erotic experience. So you see this like retraction, right? Or some sort of, like I said, this supposed retrieval of the 1950s of how women should, I don't know, stay at home, and it just makes no sense,
No, I like this quote of yours because it articulates a strange contradiction that's going on. So we've got, as you say, there are some people who've gone into this trad or traditional way of right. being. But then there's this in a lot of cinema now, or you can, we see, if you look at the mainstream cinema, it's very prudish and creepy. It's just sexless superheroes. You couldn't even imagine a moment like Han and Leia in The Empire Strikes Back, where he sort of makes a pass at her in the Millennium Falcon, and it's probably one of the most romantic scenes in all of the series. You couldn't imagine the Disney Corporation ever allowing a heterosexual kiss of any kind, but let alone anything that was sexually aggressive and played with the power of, the sort of restrained power of men and women in that moment. So we've got that, and then we've got this third track, which is actually not very prudish. It seems to be an embracing of kinks and sexual perversion. But as you've put it here, it's sort of it is covered in antiseptic. So as long as you're on Tinder, or as long as you're on Pornhub, or as long as you're in these specific spaces, or as long as you're talking about, I don't know, your rights, then you're allowed to. Or it could be in a Mardi Gras parade, could be at work, it doesn't matter. Then it's suddenly, it's on for young and old. So we've got we don't have something as simple as like that image that you've pointed out, which we'll put in the show notes of the from the Soviet era. If there's something going on there between men and women, right. She's grabbing her collar in a oddly suggestive, submissive way, but she's you're standing up straight in power, and then he's got his bulging bicep, like standing there holding his big wrench, and there's something going on there. And we've got these three tracks I just mentioned, and it's a total mess.
It's almost like we are incapable of actually experiencing it, some sort of anhedonia, or I don't know, of for life. Because really, Eros is a lust for life as well. This is not just it's a procreative. It's not hedonism, actually, quite the opposite. But today's hedonists seem to be so sterile, I guess. It's a very, very weird way to feel release, even if they are. It's very strange. But one thing that really bothers me actually is this strange misogyny that goes on with these sort of conservative young or middle-aged men, like BAP, right? Bronze Age pervert.
I've not heard of that.
That you have not heard of that? Okay, so that was in, well, his identity, I think was revealed recently. He's a professor somewhere. Says he's middle-aged, whatever that means. I don't know, in his 40s or something. I don't know. But he called himself Bronze Age pervert and wrote this book, published it anonymously, obviously, and it was all about the importance of male friendship. And but it really wasn't about. He was creating a kind of Nietzschean world, some of it based on Plato, but mainly a kind of Nietzschean world where, the elite, the most important people who are discussing intellectual ideas are the ones that are on top of the mountain, and the rest of us, if we're not good enough, we really can't do that. But he created a sort of a reality based on aesthetics purely, and there are a lot of people who follow that, these kind of younger men who want to be men, but they are doing it without any relation to women, and I think that's the trouble I'm seeing here. Ultimately becomes either homoerotic or homosexual, whatever, but don't, some of these writers are kind of pushing that expression as the pinnacle of masculinity, as if that really is masculinity. So, this is open to debate, sure, what masculinity is, but women and children are missing from this masculinity. And I think that's the problem I'm seeing with all of these, from the quote that you pulled out, that all of these people that are trying to enact some kind of perverse eros, or they're even killing it, women and children are somehow missing from that big picture. It's a very Randian world in many ways. This sort of fight against totalitarianism, at least in America, has become from conservatives, has become a sort of Randian experience, which will always be missing something. She had some, Ayn Rand had some good ideas, but if you read any of her books, you will notice that there are no children in those books.
Yes, we covered Fountainhead, which I love, with Yaron Brook, and on the most recent reading of it, I did notice the lack of children, and her inability to fold children into her vision is a problem. Yes.
I'm not saying, if people choose not to have children, that's fine. I just want to qualify that, because I also don't like it when people say you must procreate. That's your life. You can do whatever you want to do, But when there is this push of reality where family family unit is completely being destroyed in some way, whether it's through denial of children or denial of the differences between men and women, that's where I see a big problem. So, but I see that problem both from the sort of 1950s. I'm making a bit of a caricature here, but they've made themselves into a caricature, by being in this trad category. This doesn't exist. This is an uncreative life, and at the same time, these other ones that are completely sterile in their hedonism. So it's either one is missing something, I think, or several trajectories that I mentioned in that paragraph you read.
Yeah, that is interesting. That family and women and children are sort of missing from the picture there, and there is an attack going on of the nuclear family. You see it with one of BLM's stated aims on their website before they took all of that down was the destruction of the nuclear family. They've got some weird idea that people are going to be raised in collectives and stuff like that. So. Which sounds like a nightmare to me.
Completely. I can't even, living in a collective sounds insane. I mean, they always fail, obviously, because, somebody has to gather power, right? Even though everybody's supposed to be equal. So, there is that missing component, and that's very, very troubling to me. That's why I don't, as much as for example, I will agree with some of these positions on masculinity where men shouldn't be, I don't know. The issue I have with this, people like Bronze Age pervert, is the fact that they are prizing male masculinity in its physical embodiment, and it really goes a little bit towards what the Greeks, had, but it ultimately denies the humanity. If you are basing your reality purely on aesthetics, it will fail. I think life based on aesthetics only, whatever your conception of beauty is a life that will only go inward, I think, because if there's no ethics there, and if there's no justice, and I mean justice in the truest sense, not the social justice or any of the stuff that they're talking about, I mean, in a sense that we are becoming everyday good human beings, that do care for each other. Unless you do that, unless you have that as the foundation, all of this other stuff will fail. that's why you have misogyny and misandry on both ends.
I'm glad you gave me that your definition of justice there, because I was immediately thinking, yes, so I know what you're talking about. Queering up the space I was just checking that we were on the same page there.
No, absolutely. You said queering. I said I'm waiting for the right moment to use the word queer as strange in a conversation. So I don't know. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So please,
let's bring it back. Let's bring it back.
Yes.
Let's turn our focus to cinema now. You love to write about cinema. You love to watch movies, and you wrote a nice piece about the 1981 film Body Heat, which is a neo-noir film starring William Hurt and Kathleen Turner. I have some questions about Kathleen Turner's character, but perhaps you could tell us a bit about the film first and what inspired you to write about it.
Well, I've always liked it. The whole thing is just perfect, right? It's tough to do a neo-noir, but this just succeeded. The music, the saxophone alone is the character, in my opinion. But Kathleen Turner is just incredibly gorgeous and perfect femme fatale, right? And she makes William Hurt, of course, kill her husband, and she goes off with the money, and poor William Hurt ends up in prison. So, but it's how obviously noirs are. They have a lot of good back and forth one-liners between men and women, and I think Body Heat definitely is well written. It's a well-written movie, and she's just really kind of electric there, right? She's lethal, right? Her eroticism is lethal in this case. But there's an interesting atmosphere, I think, that Lawrence Kasdan has created in the film. So that's kind of ethereal, but at the same time, very much grounded in the erotic. By the way, that particular article got a Twitter sensitivity warning, so I'm very proud of that.
Really?
Yes.
What for?
I think, well, I don't know. I would assume that it had to do with eroticism. I think that
I love that Kathleen Turner is too hot for TV.
Yes, I think so.
She's so hot. She's so hot. She broke Twitter.
She broke Twitter. That's right.
It's so true, though. That scene, you talk about the scene. It's the best scene in the movie. So Maddie kicks Ned out of her house, and she's inside and he's outside, and the wind chimes are going, right. and she's like staring at him through the window with this look on her face. She's all sweaty, and he's just. It's the look on her face is just. Come and get me if you dare, you pussy, and he just right. And I think he literally breaks in, he smashes the window and goes and just takes her. And you put that expression in your article, he takes her, and I'm like, yes, that's what he does. And so what a scene. I can see how that would have broken Twitter.
I think so. It seemed like it. It was really ridiculous, but there was actually Eyes Wide Shut got the same warning. So
wow.
There you go.
It's probably because the two characters didn't sign a consent form before, he
No,
jumped
I mean,
through
you
the
should have written about Shazam instead, or Ant-Man 3, and then there'd be no blocks there. They'd say, no, this is perfectly fine.
That's right. See, Eros does it scares people. There you go. That's the problem with the society. I mean, I think that Twitter is trying to curb pornography, that's what I'm thinking, which is fine. But I don't know if it's the words or if it's the pictures that are making them do that. But they said I could appeal it, and I'm thinking, why would I even bother with that?
But where's the space for these? Where's the space for these movies, though? Because we right. can't go to the cinema to see Body Heat, Basic Instinct, and Eyes Wide Shut. We can't go, they're probably not on streaming, or if they are, they're sectioned away on an obscure platform or whatever.
Right.
So we're not allowed to talk about them on Twitter. If you're at a party and you mention them, you might get people looking at you askance or something. So right. Where how are we meant to experience these films? I feel like these films like Body Heat serve a function. That was a very popular movie.
Yes, and it's a great movie. There's a reason for it. Yeah, and I think that honestly, I really think that people just have to be more educated. Look things up. I don't know. Even if I'm trying to think, what would a young person do, let's say in their 20s or 30s. 30s, is that young? I don't even know. No, somebody in the 30s would know, wouldn't they? Right? I hope so. But maybe somebody fresh out of college or something, it's almost like they need a guide, like here's a guide to the movies. And
it used to be called Video Store Clerk, and that was me,
yes.
Emina.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
Quentin Tarantino used to work at a video store, isn't that?
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. He worked at that Video Archives, very famous video store, and that was the thing to do. You were a curator. You were someone who said, don't watch that dumb movie. Here, watch Dead Man by Jim Jarmusch. It's cool. Watch that.
Right.
Right. Whereas now it's all flattened into a Netflix algorithm and a bunch of thumbnails, and it says, and it makes dumb assumptions. Like the films that'll fold in, it'll go, you like Heat, why don't you watch The Italian Job? But the remake of The Italian Job, and you're like, you don't know me at all.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's the algorithm trying to give you a suggestion, right, instead of another person. But I do think that just researching some of these things, the internet actually is full of good stuff too, not just bad stuff. But I would think, but they would have to have desire to do so, right? People would have to have a desire to go, I've never heard of that. I'd like to find out more about it. And if they don't, that's the problem here. When I was teaching in college, when I was teaching in high school too, this is what I would do. I'd bring books, obviously, to teaching English, and I'd bring the movies into the list of movies to them as well. And the kids really didn't know, the high school kids or the college kids either. They just didn't know about these things, and the ones that are even more curious, they look it up, and that's where you start. And so maybe that's the way to do it, is to educate them in some way. I don't know, to educate them to the real thing, right? And to say, no, don't dismiss that movie because some ideologue is telling you shouldn't be watching it. It is perverse, though. It is perverse that my Twitter, that my article is getting a Twitter sensitivity warning, while the ads for, have you seen those ads for Balenciaga with children in BDSM stuff, right? But that's okay out there. Okay, that's insanity, right? I'm telling you, this world right now is extremely anti-children. Everything about it is. It's anti-Eros, and ultimately it's anti-fecundity, and of course anti-children. So it is a world set on making everybody barren, from literal point of view to like barren intellectually, barren artistically, all of that.
Well, I'll get to my question about Kathleen Turner's character in a minute, but it's interesting what you said about anti-children. Like, I mean, if you think about the pandemic, the lockdown restrictions were very anti-children, stopping them going from school, and especially in the US, like masking kids up from toddler age. I mean, it wasn't so bad, the masking here in Australia, but we had schools closed, and also the whole trans kids thing as well, like letting kids transition at a really young age. I mean, that's very destructive to children. So I really get what you're saying there.
Yes, I wrote an article. About one of the cases in Australia. Is it Australia or New Zealand? Oh my goodness, Georgie something. Oh my goodness, I don't remember now. But it was about a boy who wanted to be a girl. Anyway, they did a documentary on him, and it was the saddest thing I have seen. It was just actually he went through with the surgery, and it was the most empty moment. In any case, please continue.
Well, it seems absolutely taboo in 2023 to suggest that women have the capacity to lie or to manipulate or use their sexuality in nefarious ways, as Kathleen Turner's character does in Body Heat. But this has been a theme of many films and novels throughout the ages. Women's on-screen power seems to have moved in recent years from their mind and their sexuality to physical power. So women in film today, they literally kick butt. Many female characters today, they don't just physically fight men, they comprehensively destroy them,
Right.
So
right.
My question is, did women ask for this? Do they want to erase their sexual power and replace it with kicking butt?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't know. Maybe weird women. I don't know if they consider themselves that. I think they seem to be moving away from being human, first of all, right? And then as a result, from then being a woman or being a man. There's something really strange, I think, about a woman saving a man physically, let's say, if you have that scene in a movie or something like that.
Well, I think you'll be seeing a lot of that in the new Indiana Jones movie, which is coming out.
Oh.
There'll be a lot of that. Like that's a given. Like you need to have not only the woman rescuing the man, but the woman teaching the man, particularly the cis white man, teaching him about his privilege.
Oh, is Harrison Ford getting a lesson, a life lesson or something? Yeah, that's crazy. Well, they shouldn't be making any more Indiana Jones movies.
Well, not with Harrison Ford. He's about 100 years old,
Yeah, that's he was Indiana Jones. We have 3 movies. Let's leave it at that, and that's it. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have the answer to your question because I'm not in their mind. I think that's my question too. Do people really feel this way? Do they really think this way? I have a few friends that are thinking normally, thinking the same way that I do. There are no strange ideas about whether it's sensitivity issues, whether it's the word fat or enormous or whatever. This is really what I want to say to people. Just be normal. Right?
Don't you want to do like that? You want to do that scene from Network. You want to get up and say, I want you to get up out of your seats, go to your windows and shout, just be normal.
I've got to say, my mum used to yell that at us kids because, we would just, I had an older brother and a younger sister. We used to just run around and do just crazy stuff. And she would say that, just be normal.
It's true, though, isn't it? I do that too a lot these days, right? At my son, but it really there is like harmless abnormality, which is really simply being a unique person, right, with your own different personality, and then there's just chaos, which is what's going on right now. I think that people are burdened with chaos, burdened with all of these things that are being put on our shoulders. By various ideologies and by people who have, I think, unfortunately accepted some of them, especially with raising kids. I think that they don't want to tell their kids no, and so they're letting them do these really harmful things. So irreversible things like trans surgeries and stuff like that. But yes, I mean, it's they want to talk about the new normal, but nobody wants to be normal, right? You can't have it that way,
Well, that's almost a taboo word now. You can't
yes.
talk about being normal. You've got lots of people who identify as having all these sorts of mental disorders who get offended when you talk about normalcy.
Why don't we identify as normal? Why don't you say I identify as normal? And where's my flag?
I like that. Yeah. How many colors are going to be on your flag? What's a
just
normal?
White. Just white.
Just white. Okay. Now you're being racist. Stop it. But you see, this is how this works. Actually, when I was a grad student and throughout most of the graduate career, there was a level in the university because most of it is leftist. So I had to kind of, be quiet in most cases just so I can get my degree, and didn't really make a lot of trouble. Didn't want to get into arguments, and you also know what keywords to say, and to make sure to ensure your survival, I guess you could say. But there was a level there, I have to say, of not being able to exist. So you start to change the way you think because of the incredible ideology that's there. And then I'm wondering whether similar things happening right now in a society, because there's a pressure and a push, and people are simply not courageous. There's not a lot of courageous people out there, even those who claim to be, especially those who claim to be, like some certain pundits and writers and stuff like that, people like that. So they're not. They think they want to tell you that they're fighting a fight, but they really aren't. They're fighting it from the comfort of their home, with a big salary and following the money wherever it goes, you know. So, and regular people, I don't think that they're probably listless. A lot of people are listless. But there are a lot of parents that I talk to that are friends of mine that are trying to raise good children and live a normal life. Be normal, you know, be normal. That's my next book, Be Normal.
Oh, excellent.
I'm joking.
Now, Emina, you wrote a piece for the new Criterion called Into Great Beauty, which is all about aesthetic beauty in art and how to engage with art more broadly. Is it possible to talk about aesthetic beauty in 2023? Because we seem to be aggressively encouraged to see ugliness as beauty today.
I think it's possible. I think we just have to find it. You know, I think that we need to seek out conversations that elevate us. And in this particular case, it was a book called Seeing Like an Artist, written by Lincoln Perry, who is an artist who wrote about what does it mean to see art. But I think there are still people who exist who do feel this way. But we really have to seek those conversations out. I think this is probably true. It's a human condition. I just think it's a little bit harder. Now we have to do some little extra work to find such conversations or such possibilities. But personally speaking, I think that I'm trying to step away from the noise of the internet or of the Twitter world type of encounters, and then seek something that will elevate me and not contribute to some sort of burnout or anything like that. So I do think the art still stays there. It's not changed. It doesn't matter how much they try to do it. I think from a perspective of either theory, ideology, or any other assault on art, it does still exist. You can still look up a painting and look at it, go to the gallery and sit and engage with it. And I guess, you know, I ask these questions all the time. I think when I write these articles is this getting read? Is this getting heard? Are people, my hope is that people are elevated by it, that they're not falling into depression or that their humanity is affirmed, et cetera. That's sometimes, or I should say most of the times, on my mind when I'm writing these things. And I try to seek similar things for myself too, because I need nourishment as well.
Now, Emina, do you think that there's an agenda behind this push to make us accept images that we know to be ugly as beautiful? We've already covered this a little bit earlier in our discussion, but, you know, for example, this new Martin Luther King sculpture that they unveiled recently. I mean, look, it's just one of a million examples, but from a few angles, this thing looks obscene. It looks like at some points, I believe it looks like a male member, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, is there an agenda here? I mean, why isn't that statue just Martin Luther King looking like a Greek god?
I know a lot of people, went with that analogy or what it looked like. When I did see it, maybe it's the same thing. I thought it looked like an eel. So that was where my mind went.
But either way,
is this a Freudian moment right now? I don't know.
If the Lincoln Memorial was just imagine the Lincoln Memorial, it's just no head, no arms, no legs, just a stumpy torso sitting there on it with a suspended hat in the air over him. Would we be making pilgrimages to it?
Well, I wouldn't. I don't know about others, but that sounds crazy, doesn't it? No, you know what I thought it was? I thought that with the Martin Luther King thing, I actually think that the intention there was to elevate the embrace from the photograph, right? But it failed. I think ultimately it simply failed. And then I did a little bit of research on the artist, and he's mainly a kind of an abstract or notion artist or something like that. I forget what the word that I found in his biography, but he works a conceptual artist. Sorry, that's right, conceptual artist. So he's just working off of concepts. It's kind of like saying, here's a glass of water and I'm going to put it on a shelf and I'm going to write a little paragraph on it, and I will tell you that this glass of water is a tree. So that's sort of the thing that I think this is what happened with Martin Luther King statue. It was a failed art, I think.
Yeah, well, I just think of all the meetings and the processes and the consultations that would have occurred between the artist and whatever government body commissioned the work. And at no point did anyone stand up and say, hang on, why does this look like a big penis? You know, were people afraid to speak up and say something, I wonder?
Did they not see it? Or did they like, or even, let's say, even if they didn't see that, I would be confused actually as to what I'm watching, right? I would be confused as to what I'm actually seeing. I would say this has somehow failed as a sculpture, right? You're not conveying your message. If this was a critique in architecture school or an art school, he would get the critique. He would get the critique that he failed to convey his message. And I think that's exactly what happened.
But but if you say that, isn't that just racism?
I'm sure it is for them. Yes, I'm sure it is. Yeah.
But it's just a no-brainer. I just think he should have looked like I mean, I think it's so disrespectful to Martin Luther King and to his message to not render him in the same awesome way that many of those classic statues are in the Capitol. They should have gone to the Lincoln Memorial and said, let's make something that big and Martin Luther King and have him looking just awesome, standing at the podium saying, I have a dream, and everyone will come here and maybe we'll have an eternal flame or something near it or whatever. Right. And everyone will come and they're going to cry from the depths of their soul and be inspired and to see America for what it is, which is, a work in progress, but a successful experiment in how to be the best human being you can be, But instead, we've got this Cronenbergian eel penis monster.
Oh, good. Yeah. Oh, I like that. Yes, yes, absolutely. It was something out of a Cronenberg movie, isn't it?
But it's interesting to look at it because nowadays to quote Martin Luther King and to talk about his message of not seeing race or getting to a point where the color of your skin is just something like, the color of someone's hair. It's just, it's just different. And that it has no bearing on your life. That message is totally moot now. Like people, they call that racist now because you do have to see race now. You have to see race everywhere,
Right.
I see it.
Right.
You're white, Ricky. Deal with it. Okay.
Yeah. This especially is true. I think of this this whole cisgender white male, blah blah blah, whatever they want to call it. I don't even know what that means. I don't really want to know what it means. I don't really care what it means because it means nothing. There is no real theory behind it. There is no real philosophy behind it. There's no metaphysics behind it. And the same thing goes for this statue. There is no metaphysical substance in it at all. He not only failed as an artist. I'm not sure whether there was an ideological component to it, to be honest with you, or any sort of, woke stuff or whatever. I know a lot of people were saying that. No, I think he's just a bad artist. That's it. And my goodness, don't call somebody bad. I think that the problem here is that we are told to reserve our judgment, and that includes aesthetic judgment as well. And that's most of these things sometimes are a matter of taste, and nobody wants to look at an eel or whatever else you may think it is. I don't know.
I don't want to flog a dead horse, Emina, but I'll just point to there's that other statue of Ruth Bader Ginsburg as well, which looks like an H.P. Lovecraft monster.
Yes. Well, the funny thing is, it was when I was looking at it, I thought everybody was saying this is satanic. So everybody just started to go wacko on Twitter about it. They're worshiping Satan. Look at this. I'm thinking to myself, I'm looking at the statue a little further, I'm thinking this looks something like out of Vedic tradition. And so I did some research, and I guess it is. They were inspired. Here's the ironic part. I think what they were inspired by is goddess of fertility, but they were going for Ruth Bader Ginsburg and abortion rights. So you see how they're always getting this thing wrong. So I don't think it was satanic. I just think that it was. I just think that it was ironic.
Well, did you see any footage from the Grammys recently? They had a whole satanic sort of theme going on.
Yes, that was really bizarre. I just don't like it when conservatives go off on this Gnostic analysis, and it gets extremely silly, in my opinion.
No, but they should be happy when people do satanic stuff, because to have a satanic vision presupposes the existence of God. Right.
That would be the conclusion, right? But when people go into this, what bothers me about a lot of conservatives is that they will go into this kind of theological, Gnostic, apocalyptic movement, and everything is connected. It becomes some sort of strange conspiracy. And then there's this supernatural component to it as well. I don't know if these people worship Satan. I couldn't care less, I guess what I'm trying to say. I don't need a proof that they're worshiping Satan or eating sperm that Marina Abramovich gave them, or I don't know what else, But what I do know is that they are not normal and that some of these people are evil and their deeds show it. I don't need some kind of proof that there's a bad spiritual component to it. So it just the conversation ends up sounding really silly, in my opinion. It goes into this. I saw briefly. I don't know who the performer was at the Grammys. I saw it very briefly. It looked like some ridiculous, stupid strip club or something. It looked chaotic for sure. I don't know why would that be even a performance, but it was another occasion for hysteria, I think.
Sadly, we've run out of time. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show, and it's been great catching up. If people want to find you, can you let us know your Twitter handle? What's your handle?
Yes, it's Emina Melonic. So just my name, EMINA MELONIC. Hey, I can spell. This is good. So they can follow that, and I do have a Substack called The Magic Lantern, but it's like eminamelonic.substack.com. That's all. So, and I pretty much post my articles there, so that's what that's used for.
I think I can sum up this discussion. So find Eros in the everyday, watch good movies, and overall just be normal.
Yes, I like that. Absolutely.
Thanks, Emina.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the New Flesh podcast. If you like our work, please consider rating us on Apple Podcasts or even writing us a review. It really does help the show reach a wider audience. We'll be back with another episode next week. Until then, long live the New Flesh.